Okay, good evening. I'll call to order the Monday, November 4th meeting of the North Andover Select Board. If everyone would rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. First item on our agenda tonight is public comment. Per Select Board policy, public comment is not a discussion, debate, or dialogue between citizens and the Select Board. It is a citizen's opportunity to express his or her opinion on issues of town business. The board may respond to public comment by taking it under consideration when deliberating on an agenda item or referring the item to the administration for appropriate action or response. Public comment shall be for a period of up to 15 minutes, with speakers being allowed 3 minutes to present their material. Was anyone here for public comment this evening? Yeah. Just your name and address, please.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Brian Gross, Settlers Ridge Road. I rise before you tonight in support of agenda item E on new business. As you recall, I and a few of my neighbors spoke with you in your July 15 Select Board meeting, identifying the urgency for the town to take action to improve safety along Bradford Street, specifically between 125 and Carterfield Road. That's where I feel is the biggest challenge. I want to acknowledge the steps taken. I want to thank DPW for cutting back the vegetation on Bradford. There are fewer spaces where we now need to walk into the middle of the travel lanes. That's greatly appreciated. And also the temporary radar signs highlighting actual speed traveled makes a big difference as we're walking and seeing how fast people are really going. After review of the memorandum from Vanessa and Associates, I encourage the board to petition Mass DOT to make Bradford Street a full-time heavy commercial vehicle exclusion throughway. While the study was in a single day in August, it clearly represents that heavy vehicles in excess of 2.5 tons was 14% of traffic on Bradford Street, and 73% of traffic on that day exceeded the posted speed limit of 30 miles per hour. If you recall from public comment in July, residents were concerned about the heavy traffic and the speed that vehicles were traveling on Bradford Street. The VAI report clearly demonstrates that more than 20 trips on that day alone exceeded 45 miles per hour, and one dangerous motorist was clocked somewhere between 65 and 70 miles per hour on that street around the noon hour. Other town traffic data corroborates this, so these facts are pretty clear. We know that speed is an issue on this road. I continue to urge the Select Board to take action and reduce the speed limit on Bradford Street between 125 and Carterfield Road. This is consistent with the 25-mile-an-hour limit on Barker Street, which, as you know, is a very similar residential district, narrow roads, no sidewalks, obstructed sight lines, leading up to the three-way stop at the top of the hill at Bradford Street. In contrast, Bradford hosts more houses, has limited sight lines at Stanton Way, White Birch, Settlers Ridge, Barker, and Carterfield. And moreover, Bradford Street has several steep hills and dips, further confounding sight lines for oncoming traffic and pedestrians. I'd like to hear the board's rationale in your deliberations as to why this is not part of the implementation of a safety mitigation. And I believe excluding large vehicle traffic, reducing and enforcing the speed and stop requirements at the top of Bradford and Barker would all be needed to prevent a tragedy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rose. Any additional public comment? Okay, hearing none. Thank you very much. All right, we'll move on to our new business section. Item A is a public hearing in accordance with the general laws, Chapter 40, Section 56, to determine the percentage of local tax levy which will be borne by each class of real and personal property relative to setting the fiscal 25 tax rate. So I will take a motion to open the public hearing.
So moved. A second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We are in public hearing. With us this evening is our Chief Assessor, Bill Mitchell, here to kind of explain where we're at and where we're going.
Sounds good. Thank you. Thank you for having me tonight. Can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Good. Okay.
I think so, yeah.
So I'm going to go through this a little bit slowly. I know I've gone through this every year, but for the taxpayers at home or anybody watching, you know, it's always good to start fresh. Like no one has ever seen this stuff before because it is a little bit difficult and technical to go through. So we'll take it from the top and just talk a little bit about how we got here tonight, some of the steps we take to do that. And the numbers you see on your screen, I'll get into those and how they're actually developed in a second. But the first thing we need to do, first step in the process here, is to determine the property tax levy that's going to be borne by the property taxes in town. And we'll go through how we arrived at that number in a minute. And then the second thing, after that budget is approved, we, throughout the year, determine the assessed values for every property in town. And that is what that middle number represents right there. And then we tabulate those into classes of property: residential, commercial, industrial, and that's our third step there. After that, we will then move on to obtaining the certification of values from the Department of Revenue. That was completed this year, just in October of 21st. And then we obtained certification of new growth revenues on that same day. New growth is any new taxable items, and I'll talk a little bit about that here tonight as well. And then we present those classification options to the Select Board. That's what we're going to do this evening. And part of this discussion is to talk about the tax shift options and how the burden of the levy is shifted from each class to another. At the end of the evening, likely you'll vote on a tax shift option, and then if that's done, then as soon as tomorrow the rest of the finance team will go ahead and finish up the forms and certify to the votes taken here tonight and submit those to the Department of Local Services for approval of a tax rate, so we can then send those bills out by January 1st. But first, before we get into a little bit of the tax dollars, I wanted to talk a little bit about the changes in your assessed values tonight and some of the things you'll see in some of the sectors of the properties. Most of this could be reflected as a percent of value change, but in here as well is some significant changes due to classification, deletions of parcels, additions, things like that. But overall, you'll see at the top part, and I have that highlighted column all the way to the right, it's reflective of each class of property and about what it's gone up this year or gone down. And you can see that the single-family class finally has slowed down a little bit this year, still going up, but over the past 2 years, we've seen that in double digits, anywhere from 13 to 15%. But this year, we're seeing about 3 to 3.5% value increase in that particular class. And then condominiums, we're seeing about a 5% increase. 2 to 3 families, we see that the 3 families about the same as the single family class, going up about 3.6%. 2 families down a little bit. And then overall, what you'll see here, one particular item is that you'll see that industrial class down about the middle of the page. You'll see that go down about 48%. And that's a big number. And the explanation here is simply that the Amazon has entered their first year of their tax increment financing plan. So this year, as well as next year, they get 80% of their new value stayed in taxes. So that's what you're seeing there, is a $300 million reduction in value for that class. So that explains that. And then some of the other highlights we'll see is the forestry land. Those are very small numbers, but what we had is 3 properties that are in that classified forestry, which is a tax incentive program that came out of that class and is now open for development. So although it's 46%, you can see that the assessed value difference is very small. On the second page here, mostly any of those things you see with a 500 code of personal property, those are equipment owned by businesses in town or utility companies. And so although we saw that big 46% decline in the industrial sector, what you're seeing here on the very first column is that $304 million uptick in personal property value. And again, This couldn't have worked out any better for us, but that is essentially the first year that personal property is being taxed to Amazon. And that's because they're in full operation and swing now. So those are all the robots and moving mechanics and machinery in that building. So that pretty much offsets that negative we saw in industrial, positive in personal property, so keeping that shift to the commercial, industrial, and personal property class. So that's very helpful, so the residents don't see that burden being shifted. Some of the other things, the corporations, we see a 23% increase there. That is from, again, manufacturers or industrial corporations or some of our commercial properties adding new equipment and expanding their business, which is good. And then the other might be the wireless telephone companies. You'll see that one up about 16.6%. Those are new equipment on some of the towers and things like that. And so the total valuation of real and personal property overall for the whole town ended up being about an increase of 3.2%. So the overview here is when we talk about percentage of values by class, you can see in the top left here, basically this was last year's values, and residential properties make up about 84% of the value of the entire town. And you can see here on the lower left, that has stayed about the same, 84.17%. And over here it's a summary of just exactly what's happened. And again, you can see that the industrial and personal property basically offset each other there. And what that does is it basically stays that shift in the commercial, industrial, and personal property class. So when we talk about the tax levy, or the amount we raise in taxes, this is essentially how it's made up. And so our property tax levy, the entire budget the town needs to operate this year, is over here in this top column here, the $153 million. How is that made up? We see about $15.6 million in state aid, local receipts, which could be motor vehicle excise taxes, library fees, ticketing, parking fees, whatever the case may be, makes up about $12.1 million of that. We have some enterprise funds, other revenue, including free cash, and the CPA, which is that Community Preservation Act that we raise each year. And so all of those are accounted for, and then what we're left here in the bottom is the amount that's left over that we have to raise from property taxes. And essentially, that's common in communities across Massachusetts, that about 65 to 70% of the entire levy is raised by property taxes. So this page here we're going to go through very slowly, because I think this one's probably the most important of the entire presentation. We talk a little bit about Proposition 2.5, and a lot of people misunderstand this concept or misunderstand the law. There's a couple definitions we want to talk about tonight, and one is the levy limit, and the other is the levy ceiling. And then we're going to talk a little bit about excess levy capacity. Now, the levy limit is the maximum amount a community can tax up and above the prior year, and that's where that 2.5 comes into play. So that each town is allowed to raise 2.5% over last year's levy limit. That does not mean that each individual property tax bill can't increase by more than 2.5%, because there's too many other factors that are included in that. One being if you put an addition on your home, or a certain sector of the market goes up higher than another, they'll see a shift in burden. So I have a lot of people that ask me about that. So every tax bill is a little bit different, but the 2.5 does not apply to that. It does apply to the taxing capacity of each municipality. How do we do that? So over here on the upper right-hand side of this page, you'll see how exactly we got to that number. And so we take last year's levy limit of $96 million and some change, and this is where that 2.5% comes in, so we'll add that. And then we add any new growth. The reason why new growth is allowed is because that's new tax dollars of things that haven't been taxed in the past. And so that's allowed to increase your tax levy up and above last year. And this figure here has been a roller coaster ride over the past 3 or 4 years, simply because we see Amazon coming off, their real estate coming down, their personal property coming on. And so we do our best to estimate this number, but we really essentially don't know what it is until late October of just before this hearing. And so once you add those up, you can see the levy limit right there. And the only thing you can add up and above that is any capital debt exclusions you might have borrowed in the past. And for us, this is the last year of the high school project that was funded in 2005. Here we are in 2025. So that payment you see here is our last debt exclusion payment for those loans. So that's coming off the books. And so now we arrive at this $104,488,000. That is our taxing capacity or levy limit that we can raise this year. However, because this is unexpected growth, it's good that we see that, we have that taxing potential, but essentially we don't want to increase the tax burden on the single-family class by raising that. So what we're seeing here down the lower left is excess levy capacity. But before we do that, I just want to also talk a little bit about this levy ceiling here. And levy ceiling is the amount that we can go to based on a 2.5 override tax vote. That's up and above this figure here, but it can only be approved by taxpayers at a town meeting. And so this here, this levy ceiling, that's the amount that the town could raise with a vote from the taxpayers, which is $207 million, or almost twice what we're able to raise. And essentially, again, going back to the 2.5 proposition, the reason why that is there is it's 2.5% of the total value of the town. So that's the second piece of Proposition 2.5. But the excess levy capacity, we talk about that. What it is the difference between the maximum allowable levy that we just got to. We subtract out the levy that we're going to raise to pay for the town's budget, and that which is left on the table or we're not taxing is the excess levy capacity, which essentially is about that $5 million based on the growth number that we have up there.
So just a reminder, this is the plan, to keep the $5 million there and to bring it on every 2 years as the TIF comes off to fund Facilities Master Plan 2 and to make sure that the taxpayers don't have a $1,000 shift on their bills, right? So, well, it can be shocking to see, because even I was shocked when I saw it, even though I knew it was the plan. It is on purpose that we're holding that.
Right, this way, as the tax dollars come back on for Amazon, you'll see the 80% go down to 60%, go down to 40, and so forth. As that comes on, we can then take that excess levy capacity and start bringing it on, so Amazon pays that bill and not the taxpayers. So putting it all together, how do we arrive at a tax rate? This is how we do it. Just like on the previous page here, you take the total budget of $153 million, and we subtract out all of those other aids that we get from state aid, local receipts, enterprise funds, et cetera, and we're left with that figure we talked about before, which is that tax levy. You simply take that number and divide it by the entire value of the community, and you essentially arrive at a single tax rate of $11.98 per thousand. That's the simplest part of math tonight. We do. So although we look at a single tax rate, what you have to do is look at what we've done historically and then what the options might be. So when we talk about voting a factor tonight, residential factor or CIP factor, a residential factor of 1 or a CIP factor of 1, it essentially means that each class of property will raise 100% of their fair share. And so when we talk about that at this screen here, you remember that about 84% of the residential base is residential values. So if we adopt a factor of 1, they will basically pay 84% of the levy. And then so forth with the CIP, they will pay about 18%. So if we do that, that would be the tax rate for everyone. And so historically, we haven't done that here in North Andover. We have split the rate. And this is the low end of the spectrum, but just for argument's sake, if we go to the maximum split that we could do tonight, or 1.5 CIP, what this means is the commercial properties are paying 1.5 times or 150% of their normal taxation, and then the residents would pay about 90% of their tax share. And so that would reduce the levy paid by the residential tax base from 83% down to 76% of the levy, but the other would go up significantly. And then if we did that, these would be the resulting tax rates for each class. With that being said, on the next 5 pages that you see here, I do this only because you can raise by each percentage point. And so you'll see what the tax rates are all the way over to the right based on the corresponding residential factor you select in the second column to the right. And so it gives you a good idea for every percentage point what happens with the tax rate. So I won't go through every one, but what I'll do here is on this 6th page here, I've done some highlighting here of historically where we've been in the past and where our shift has been. Since 2022, we were at about a 1.3% or 1.32% shift. And before that, we were in that range, anywhere from 1.28 to 1.39. But this is essentially where we've arrived at in the past and historically. So if we were to keep things approximately the same, you can look at the 1.32% on the left, which is the second column, or second row up from the bottom that's highlighted. That's essentially where we've been in the past, and the corresponding rates at that point would be 1126 and 1582. And so you can adjust that a little bit depending on the resulting tax bills, which we'll get to in a minute. But just so people know right now, the residential tax rate and commercial tax rates are currently at 1109 and 1560 per thousand. So we'll see the tax rates go up a little bit, but that's, again, going back to that chart where we brought it all together, it's reflective of values. You know, the values haven't gone up as much in the past, but the budget goes up, and so it's not enough to offset a complete reduction in the tax rate. Here's some valuation trends that we talked a little bit about. You can see that since 2018, 19, they've steadily gone up in every sector of the market, the single family, the commercial, and industrial values. What I did here as well is that because Amazon makes up almost half of the industrial value, I did, of course, throw that out so you can get a realistic average of what industrial properties do over the past few years. And just to give you an idea, that Amazon value, of course, before was about $407 million, and so now, acting that TIF, they'll be valued at about $98.7 million this year. So this was interesting. We added a couple columns. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for pointing that out. I think it is important as we look at tax rates. Not much to understand unless you add where we've been with the residential or CIP factor in the past. So that was a good idea to take a look at that and see where we've been. You can see on the right-hand side column to the right where we've been since about 2009. Really, we've been in that 1.3 to high 1.2 shift, and we've done that historically. And so when we look at that, because that shift has been held steady, 1.3% or so, you can see here what's happened since Amazon has come aboard. We haven't shifted any differently, but you can see the share on the residential class has dropped significantly from, 83% of the levy down to about 78%, and that's because a large sector of the market is now being picked up by that class. And conversely, you can see that with the commercial, industrial, personal property. Before, they were making up about 16.7%. Now they're up into like 20 to 21% of the range. And so here is the resulting tax bill increase on each sector based on the shift. I've highlighted the column that we are typically in, and you can see here, this is essentially what the average tax bill for a single-family property might go up, the average commercial tax bill would go up, and then the average industrial tax bill would go up. And even if you go one column to the right there, you can see that as you shift even just 1 percentage point, how big of a difference it makes in that commercial and industrial class, because you have to shift a great deal in order for 84% of the properties in town to see a decrease. And so even 1 percentage point, you are, the industrial property goes from $8,800 tax bill to $9,200. And then on these next few pages, I again did this by every 5 percentage points, just to give you an idea. And you can see here, this is 1.35. That's right in that range. We arrive at a 1.32. We're right in between these two columns here. And you can see what a big difference it is in the tax bills. Any questions? So essentially, this last page is just wording for you. Depending on the factor that you choose, this would be your vote this evening. And then the other options that are available to you tonight, and I'm happy to go over them. We've gone over them in the past. It's a little intensive, but we talk about a residential exemption, a small commercial exemption, open space. The open space exemption doesn't even apply to us. We don't have classified open space here in town, so adopting an open space exemption just wouldn't do anything. Small commercial, again, is something where both the residential and small commercial, you're shifting a portion of the value is what you're giving for an exemption. So if you decide to do a 10% exemption on residential, it's 10% of their value. So what happens as that value increases, even someone that gets that exemption still sees an increase in their taxes as you get to the higher valued properties. So historically, we haven't adopted any of these in the town. And that's all I have.
Anyone have additional questions for Bill? Or any members of the public? Or, yeah, Laura, go ahead.
Just a quick question. What do we expect the Amazon personal property to do as the years go on? Is it going to decrease, or do they keep, upping their game kind of with the robots and stuff?
Yeah, that's such a massive property. It's a great question. We use what's called a straight line depreciation method based on valuation. They'll use a Macker's IRS schedule, which is just a write-off for tax purposes. So they depreciate their equipment a lot quicker than we would, but every company is like that. We value property based on its use. So as those robots get older, it's a slower depreciation based on their life expectancy. So where a machinery or a big process machine might last longer, might last 10 years, those robots might only last 2 or 3. So yes, the short answer is the value will go down depreciation-wise, but they'll be adding new equipment all the time because it's such a big facility. So I think any equipment that's added starts that depreciation schedule over, and therefore they'll at least sustain that value, if not increase.
Yeah.
That is good.
Technology will change quicker than
Their technology is amazing too. So.
I think maybe actually this last year, given the current state of commercial real estate and where things are at right now, have you seen an uptick in abatement requests or challenges on
Yeah,
Goes over commercial more than residential, or?
Yeah, that's been a very, a large challenge for us in the assessor's office. Commercial properties or large commercial owners hire tax consultants to appeal their assessments. And so we deal with a lot of tax attorneys, tax consultants that appeal their values, and it can be a lot of work and a lot of time and effort on our part to do that. It also is something we've got to be aware of because the overlay account gets hit by anything that we abate. And so we have seen an uptick in commercial industrial abatements and appeals with those, and they're not slowing down. If anything, they're going to increase. So that is something we got to be careful of as you shift the rate. Just a shift in the rate will bring more appeals to our office, and then if it gets to the appellate tax board scenario where we have to go down and fight the value, then we're talking about getting an independent appraiser to come up with an independent value. That could be $20,000 per property, plus $400 an hour to get them to testify, and so it becomes a challenge for us to weigh those options and fight those appeals.
So it could end up costing more in the long run.
It could,
not careful.
yeah, it could. It could cost, it's labor intensive. So you're talking time of staff, you're talking time of appraisers, you know, court cases tying us up, you know, so there's a balance there, certainly.
Okay.
Reminder to open to the public.
Yeah, we are still in public hearing. If anyone's interested to ask a question or make a comment regarding the presentation we just saw. Okay. Any other questions or commentary from the board?
Well, I'd like to, even though you did a great job with the explanation, I always like to say that the 2.5% is over the whole town. And then it gets assigned to you as to how much you pay by what your property value is worth. So there's good news and there's bad news for the most part with the 2.5%. If your taxes are going down, that could be a little bit of bad news, that your area or your house, your property is not as desirable as somebody else's. But the good news is they could be building a brand new school or freshening up another building or whatever, and then your property value will probably go up. But with that comes higher taxes.
Yeah,
So
that's
it's a
always,
little confusing to the public, because it's like, wait a minute, it's not supposed to be more than 2.5%.
right.
But
Right.
that's not always
And-
it's usually not the case. It gets spread out amongst of similar property owners in areas. And so if you're going up 2.5%, could be good news, your house is worth more. And if it isn't, then there could be some bad news. Maybe you need to do some freshening up at your house.
It's always a challenge, but that's one of the hardest jobs for our office is determining your value every year. And so my last appeal to the taxpayers is it's not a bad thing to let the assessor in your house, despite what the people say, because we definitely want to be fair and equitable, and we're not looking, you can just see just from this presentation, if you look at it, we're not out there collecting extra dollars. All we're trying to do is determine your piece of the bigger pie.
And you do that on a regular schedule, planned, that is not driven by any outside factors.
That's correct.
Other than comps.
Other than comparables, it's no different than having an appraiser come to your house, you know, and trying to determine your value. The only thing I will say, when the appraiser comes, you clean your house, you make it look real good. When the assessor comes, you make it look real dirty. And it's always a plus.
So
Apologies to
they
all
bring
of you.
they bring the dog in,
My
the
advice.
cat in.
It's always really interesting. I mean, we've seen it, all have seen it multiple times, and you still pick up new and different things every time you explain things different. You know, it's really interesting, and I hope that everybody who's with us tonight has learned something.
Me too.
He doesn't usually have an audience to speak.
It can be complicated, and the language is like almost a foreign language, you know.
It really is.
Evaluation, assessment, appraisals, they're all kind of the same thing, but not totally.
Absolutely.
If there's no additional comment, I'll take a motion on the public hearing.
Move to close the public hearing?
I'll
Second.
Motion is second. All those in favor?
Aye.
We are out of the public hearing. Thank you, Mr. Mitchell.
All right, thank you.
All right,
You did a great job. Thank you so much.
item B, we're going to now take everything we just learned and vote on a percentage of the local tax levy which will be borne by each class of real and personal property relative to setting the fiscal year tax rate. So I'll entertain a motion when someone's saying the tax rate.
I want to.
It's the residential fact, it's the residential factor that you're voting.
I'll move that the North Andover Select Board votes in accordance with MGL Chapter 40, Section 56, as amended, the percentage of local tax levy which will be borne by each class of real and personal property relative to setting the fiscal year 2025 tax rates, and sets the residential factor at .9398 with a corresponding CIP shift of 1.32 pending certification of the town's annual tax recap by Massachusetts Department of Revenue, which keeps in what we typically do in raising or sharing the burden equally between, or as equally as we can between the residents and commercial.
We don't need all that in the motion.
No, we don't. It's just my own commentary.
I have a motion at .9398. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
A motion is second. Any discussion?
That was my discussion.
That was the discussion. I would echo the sentiments. I mean, listen, it's always a little challenging. You never want to be one saying, yeah, champion raising taxes, but I think in this time where the residents do bear so much of the burden here and get a lot of the benefit, I think I do like where I see this CIP factor has trended. We don't want to hit our businesses hard. We want to be able to attract businesses, but also be mindful of what all of our residents are going through. The value of your home going up is fantastic if you're going to sell or refinance, but we're just going to live here and bear the taxes. We all understand what that's all about. So, thank you for a very thorough presentation.
That's great, thank you.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Seems to be in line with what we've been doing, over the past few years, so.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Thank you, guys.
Set- Thank you, Bill. Set at .9398. Okay, if it pleases the board, I'm actually going to go out of order here to item E, which is our Bradford Street truck exclusion. So if everyone recalls from our July meeting, residents brought forward some concerns that they had, and we've commissioned a study to move forward with studying the exclusion. So we've got John Borghese, and we have someone here from Vanessa and Associates as well, who's going to kind of walk us through their findings. So,
Just gonna need a minute to,
okay, no worries.
he's got a couple of slides he wanted to try and set up here.
We go from assessing to traffic. We're really, keeping everybody awake back there. Yeah.
It's all good stuff.
Yeah.
It's a lot of pressure when you're trying to.
I know. Been there.
Totally.
I'm just happy it showed up.
Step one.
Of course, whoever set up the stuff at our work spelled my name wrong.
It's funny.
It's D-E-R-E-K. Go see.
Well, I fear the last name is wrong.
It's taking forever to log in though. Apologize. All right, here we are.
Maybe just get your name for the record.
Yes, of course. Is this on? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can
Okay,
hear you.
perfect. Name's Derek Roach, 35 New England Business Center Drive, Vanessa and Associates. We're the traffic consultants.
If you want, I'll do a quick intro.
Yeah,
And then
absolutely.
I'll
Go ahead.
read it right over to you. Great. I'm John Borghese, Assistant DPW Director / Town Engineer, and Derek Roach is here, Senior Transportation Engineer with Vanessa and Associates. Tonight we're here to summarize the results of a traffic study performed on Bradford Street. The residents living on Bradford Street had reached out to both the town manager's office and the DPW, indicating that the truck traffic specific on Bradford Street had significantly increased after we had some local construction projects that required detours directing traffic to use Bradford Street. Once the residents had reached out to us, the DPW reached out to our transportation consultant, Vanessa and Associates, and we asked them to perform a traffic study to determine if the current traffic volumes meet the requirements for truck exclusion. And now I'll turn it over to...
Right as it goes out.
It'll come back. Hopefully, there it is. Now I'm going to turn it over to Derek with Vanessa and Associates, who'll go through the traffic study performed, summarize the results of the traffic study, and more importantly, discuss the next steps. So, go right ahead,
Absolutely. So the first thing with a heavy commercial vehicle exclusion is there's two sets of criteria you have to meet. You can meet one of three for each one. So luckily, we meet one for each set. So the first set of criteria is to justify the truck exclusion itself. As John said, that is related to truck percentages on the roadway. You need typically 5 to 8%. Our count showed 14%, significantly higher. Also, you could have had either of those other two bullets there, which is continued heavy wheel loads will result in severe deterioration. We'll show that we kind of meet that a bit too. And then the last one, if primarily residential in nature and the municipality has requested exclusion only for the nighttime hours, which we're not doing. This is a full exclusion. Don't get scared. I just knocked over my water. I'm sorry. All right, so the second set of criteria is to justify the alternative route. We hit the first one on that, whereas the alternative route is wholly within the community. You can have additional criteria you could hit where part of the route is in the community and the adjacent community says that they are okay with you proposing a truck route exclusion. And the other one is the alternative route lies partially within the adjacent community, but only the state highway in the adjacent community. But luckily, we hit the first two of both of these, so we move on. So we looked at the route here. As you can see, the red line is Bradford Street. The green is 125 and 133, the route that is the alternative route. They're not that different in length. It's about 0.8 miles, so there's really not that significant of a burden to go the additional 0.8 miles. And the A, B, C, D, E, and all those reference to the next table. So I'll go to that next. So what we did was we looked at the conditions of the roadways along just set intervals mostly. That's what the A, B, C, D, and the 1, 2, 3 represent. We looked at the roadway condition. We looked at whether there's sidewalks or not. We looked at the width of the roadway. We looked at the condition of the roadway and the condition of the sidewalks, if there were sidewalks. And as you can see from this table, the first A through H there is all Bradford Street. As you can see, it's a pretty narrow roadway, 21 to 23 feet-ish in width. Pavement condition from 125, I'm not sure exactly where C is. I guess that's right to Settlers Ridge Road about. Condition is not as good, it's fair. You'll see I have some examples of some of the specific roadway conditions that we got out there coming up. There's no sidewalks on any of Bradford Street. Past Settlers Ridge Road, condition improves a bit, mostly good condition. Relative to the alternative route, though, where you can see the roadway is significantly wider, 27 to, at times, up to 91 feet in width. You're widening out for a bunch of turn lanes. That has sidewalk on a significant portion of that route. Those sidewalks are in good condition. The roadway along that entire route is in good condition. So we're painting a pretty good picture here, I think. So these are some of the examples we were talking about on Bradford Street. You can see here there's some significant pavement rutting. They've patched it multiple times, it looks like. So this would lie into that second criteria where we would think that continued truck usage on this roadway would lead to detrimental conditions. Here's again, this is longitudinal cracking. Pretty significant. This is only a small section of it, and I think it ran for maybe a quarter of a mile. So it's a pretty significant longitudinal crack. So then, summarizing all of that, essentially what we're looking at is Bradford Street is a residential street. It's narrower. It's not designed to be carrying this type of heavy vehicle traffic. 125, 133 were designed with that in mind. There are several locations where we're seeing failing roadway conditions that would definitely deteriorate more with heavy vehicles continuing to use that roadway. There's no sidewalks on Bradford Street, so the pedestrians and bicyclists have to share the same space with these commercial vehicles. There is something that is not supposed to be here. Oh, it's tracking my changes. Oh, sorry, ignore that. Anyway, so that obviously with the pedestrians and bicyclists having the share roadway with the heavy commercial, we're potential to create numerous conflicts there. The alternative route's wider. It's designed to carry those vehicles. As I mentioned earlier, the travel distance is only 0.8 miles longer, so it's not a significant burden on the trucks to have to go that additional distance. And so we think it is logical to exclude trucks from Bradford Street, and so we would suggest that. So next steps are, so the board here decides to endorse the heavy commercial vehicle exclusion. You have to write up a letter and submit that under your guys' letterhead to MassDOT. We could help you guys write said letter, but by regulation, it's got to come from you guys requesting it. In that letter, you guys have to acknowledge that you were taking acceptance of responsibility for installation, maintenance, and enforcement. Installation and maintenance of the signage and enforcement of the rule. MassDOT would review that request. They might come back with some additional informational stuff they're requesting, maybe a couple comments on the study. We would follow back up with them. We think maybe 3 to 4 months, and then you would have an answer. So that's it. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Derek. John, I'm sure you cringed a little bit at the longitudinal crack and patching.
It's all good. It slows them down. As soon as I pave it, they speed up.
In theory. Any questions so far?
We don't have to put a bicycle path on the road, do we, if we make improvements?
No.
No.
That's good.
Nope.
Yes?
Just pretty, it's
yeah.
clear.
Like it's pretty straight.
Thorough, cut and dry.
Pretty straightforward on this one. Yeah, I would say the longitudinal cracking that you point out, is that typically the result of vehicles that are too heavy for a roadway? Isn't it?
That and the rutting are both
Yeah.
signs of that, correct.
Okay.
Why would that be different though? Like, then, do you pave like 133 differently? Or?
You probably know better than me, but yes, you would pave them differently typically.
Yeah.
The layering underneath, how thick they are, the materials you're using.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Much more asphalt. We just did 125, 133. I want to say it was 8+ inches of asphalt that gets put on there. Plus the sub-base that's under that is much more substantial than what you're going to see on Bradford Street. Bradford
Shoulders
Street's-
are different too.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah, well, yeah, there's much more shoulders, much more width,
Like-
on like 125, 133
And
versus
sloping.
Bradford Street. Yep. Yeah, I mean, Bradford Street, I'm sure those who grew up here, I remember it was a dirt road when I was a kid growing up on half of it, so it was essentially a farm road.
And the speed limit is 30?
I believe
that's
so.
correct.
There's some parts of it that are 40, some parts that are 30. It's statutorily set, it's a statutory speed limit. So it's 30 miles per hour in a thickly settled or business area for at least 1/8 of a mile. And remember, one of the conversations we had in the past is that it's every 200 feet, basically, where it's considered. And so this is a strange street because it just keeps changing, right? We can't do anything about the speed limit in this venue. What we can decide to do, if we so wanted, is at town meeting, we could adopt the local option of Chapter 9D, Section 17C, which would allow us to reduce speed limits to 25 mile per hour. The only thing less than 30 right now in town is in a school district. Andover has recently done that. I believe Andover did it townwide.
So we're not in a public hearing at this moment, sorry, yeah.
Andover has recently adopted that and went to 25 townwide. MassDOT does allow you to either adopt it townwide or adopt it street by street. They advise you typically not to go street by street because it can be confusing for drivers, and then you tend to have drivers who appeal speeding tickets because they say they weren't sure what the speed limit is. But it's something we certainly can explore whether we want to go to.
So the town, if we did town-wide, we're talking like,
Except on
Except state roads.
state.
except state roads.
Yes. What's interesting is that there are some regulatory speed limits as well that are set by MassDOT that are outside of the statutory speed limits. So you do have times when it's a regulatory speed limit instead. And so if we did decide that we wanted to adopt Chapter 90, we probably should do a full evaluation of all the speed limits on all the streets.
I feel like I've seen communities where they say 25 townwide except in posted areas.
Yes.
Right, so then you can sort of pick and choose which.
If you don't know, assume 25.
Yeah. Okay.
Like I said, there are special speed limits, special speed regulations that exist as well, which adds another whole layer of excitement. to it.
Right.
But,
This gets
Yeah,
complicated.
it's certainly something we can discuss as the warrant's coming up, and we could talk with the Andover Select Board and see how their rollout went.
I do think it's something we ought to talk about, not just in the context of Bradford Street. And speeding in town is not isolated just to Bradford Street right now. I think as we've all experienced. So while it is an impact here, it certainly impacts throughout the town. So I think it's something we should take up and figure out what that process is and
But
put it
25
down.
is hard, like, 25
Sorry.
town-wide is hard, I think.
25%, I think, I agree. I think that would be really, really challenging.
And without, I mean.
Without
would have to
enforcement,
be
it doesn't,
enforced,
yeah, without,
so
that's the
a whole
real
other-
issue, you know. Right now, if it's at 30, we still have people exceeding that. That's one of the questions I had for you, Mr. Roach. We know which vehicles are traveling on the road. We know the speed aggregate of the vehicles traveling on the road. Do we know which vehicles were speeding? Like, so if we take a bunch of trucks off the road, were trucks exceeding the speed limit?
Yeah, so.
I'm not saying they'd be the only ones doing it.
I don't think we do.
Yeah.
We might be able to contact the count vendor, maybe they have it to that detail, but I think.
Doesn't change my opinion, I'm more just
I think
curious.
they're
yeah.
two separate counters,
Yeah.
essentially, so.
I think you're right.
Because I like
That's how
wonder
I
if it will
understand it too.
change, if it's mostly truck speeding, maybe it's
I would
not so
suspect
bad
it's not
after.
mosely
I
truck
would agree
speeding,
with that
because
as
it's
well.
still, 86% of the traffic is cars, right? But I'm just curious, 'cause I know some of those trucks compound the issue,
Yes.
right? When they're barreling down, so. That's all my questions. So.
But, they're supposed to be teaching in driver ed that in, areas that tend to be a little bit more congested, that there's just minimums of what you take tests for so you can get your driver's license. And am I not correct with that? My kids have been driving for a while now.
Well, that's part of one of the issues I think there is I haven't been back to driver ed since I took it, right? So we don't continually educate people is part of the big issue with that stuff. But yeah, I mean, from my recollection of driver ed, yes, they taught you to follow the speed limit.
There are plenty of adults.
No, but
who
even if
use
there's
this,
not
yeah.
a sign, if you're in a
Right.
congested
Right.
area, there is
Right.
sort of a minimum that
Minimum.
you're supposed to be
Minimum,
doing.
yeah, that is true.
Yeah.
They just, even on Halloween night, people were driving much too fast. Because the kids were trick-or-treating and, right, like, that's common sense, I would think, but.
It is, but maybe not if you're a teenager just
I don't
yet.
think it's all teenagers,
It's all-
I'm not gonna lie.
I'm quite confident plenty of adults
Yes.
speed through town. I've experienced it.
Listen, those flashing speed lights speed signs have slowed me down
Oh,
on
yeah.
more than one occasion, where
Yeah.
I'm like,
No,
oh, you're not paying attention, you start going fast,
Yeah,
and then it
We all
reminds you.
get it. We all feel the same way when you see it and you go, oh, boy.
They're great, we need more.
So the process is assuming we vote in favor of this, we draft a letter and get it off to the state and then
And
wait.
3 to 4
we
months.
follow. Does it just go into the black hole? Are we able to?
No, we contact our legislators, we
Yeah.
talk to our representatives in MassDOT,
We're going to
Okay.
contact our legislators.
help it move along.
Good. You'd never know there sometimes. So, okay. If no other further discussion, I'll take a motion.
I'll move that the select board petition the state for a truck exclusion on Bradford Street.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
And it's reasonable by the
First step, and we're much aware, so.
First time I've been applauded at a meeting.
Thank you all.
That's
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
And you learned about your taxes tonight.
I know, I hope you found the
You're
tax
You're very
part
welcome.
interesting.
Thank you for your patience. Awesome.
We don't want anyone to get hurt either, so.
Yeah. We'll just take a couple moments, let people clear out.
So this,
And I learned about statutory parking.
For speed limits?
Speed limits,
Regulatory
yeah,
speed
versus like, yeah, regulatory, yeah.
so this isn't
More
no
than
longer.
meets the eye, you know?
I wasn't gonna get too
Who spells
advised.
his name
Spelled
wrong?
different, yeah, exactly, yeah.
Well, we have that
More
in the
than
Connolly
meets the eye.
family.
I'm sure plenty of that.
Nice
you
to
all.
see you, Patty. Her last name, her maiden name was Connors, and mine being Connolly. We sat next to each other all the time, from
sure.
homeroom
I'm sure.
to so many other things. And her dear husband Tim is great too.
Okay.
Miss Wise.
Andrew, you're gonna present.
We're gonna give him.
Take credit.
We're gonna give him a
You should.
lot of credit.
You don't have the design done.
Yeah.
I saw our
Okay. All right, moving right along on our agenda, back on schedule with item C, which is to vote on our winter snow emergency.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You'll remember that back in 2020, we changed how we do our winter snow emergency here in town. When there is going to be, I'm saying this at the snow word right now, and I see Jim's face is getting like whiter and whiter.
Mine is too, because I
Right?
gotta get those wreaths up.
Yeah. If we see that there is going to be a storm, the police chief and the DPW director get together and determine whether or not a snow emergency should be declared. We do post that on our website, on social media, and through a robocall. We find this is a much better business-friendly way to do this rather than not allow parking on our main streets all year long.
From October to
Yep.
April.
Okay, it seems pretty straightforward to me. I'll take a motion.
I move that the select board approve the winter snow emergency as presented.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
We are talking about snow already.
It's happening.
Couldn't
We
happen
need
anytime
flowers.
now.
It was a little flurry the other day.
All right, last item under this is to take a vote on our fiscal '26 budget policy statement.
So this is kicking off our budget season for the year, which is very exciting. And it basically encompasses all of the budget goals and directives that we did during our goal setting, and gets us ready to move.
Excellent. All right, anyone have any questions for the town manager on this? I actually do have a couple, if it's okay.
Go ahead.
All right, under OPEB,
Yep.
number 2. What does that mean?
Hold on.
Help me out with that.
Under OPEB number 2.
Yeah, annually $75,000 to be deposited per person cost.
So when we hire a new employee, we put a certain portion of their salary into the OPEB stabilization account for 6 years. Is that what you're?
Yeah, so that's what, I guess what I'm trying to figure out. So if we hire someone, $75,000 per person is put into OPEB for 6 years,
Yes.
regardless of their salary.
Yes.
So, wow, so you've
And
had
you're saying for 6 years, 6 consecutive years, is that what you're saying, or?
So
a,
we
or as
do-
long as they're
Spread
employed,
out
right?
over-
We do $75,000 a year plus.
Plus.
We do the OPEB cost for each person that we hire, any new employee. So we automatically
Oh.
put $75,000 in a year, and then we
Yeah,
calculated
per
the OPEB cost to be around 11 grand per person.
Got it.
So, for instance, if with the new middle school teachers, right, you would have $77,000 plus 75.
That's what didn't make sense to me. Thank you. Okay, great.
It could be worded better. So
75,000 is the floor,
Yes.
essentially. Okay.
It could be, this could be worded, I think, in a friendlier way, so we'll be sure to look at that with Finance Committee this year as we go through our policies.
Okay, thank you. And then the only other question I had is, well, I guess, sticking on OPEB, and just looking at our numbers, the OPEB liability, if you look at the kind of the last, I think 5 years we have in there, varies so much from year to year. Why is that?
Because of the market.
Just because of the market? Okay.
Yeah.
So that's market
I don't know if there's
fluctuation?
anything he wants to add, but I got really excited last year, and I was like, I have so much less OPEB liability, and it was just because of the way the market works.
Got it, okay. For viewers at home, that was the discount rate that Dennis mentioned. So, and the last item I had is we have a budget policy statement on the special education fund at $750,000. Should we still have that in here, even though we're winding it down?
So no, we will be advising you to remove that. We didn't want to do it. We left it in last year because we had not yet depleted it, but we will be asking you to remove that from your policies as well as the finance committee.
Okay, so we'll vote on this with it in, but then remove it
Yes.
later? Okay.
And when you say, and also finance committee, you mean that the,
They have to vote to remove.
They have the same, they
have the same-
ratify the same financial policies that you do. So we have you both ratify them.
okay, I thought you were talking about that their fund.
Nope, their fund will stay whole. They have $1.5 million a year.
Yeah, when I started, I think we had 10,000.
I believe it. Yeah.
I was on the finance committee for 4.5 years, and I think it was 10,000.
It's
Pretty
important,
sure.
it's important to have that reserve, so that will stay whole, but we would like to spend, if we have special education overages, we'd like to use operating funds, not stabilization account, and create structural deficits.
Yeah.
Right, so, and I guess as a follow-up to that, there's a lot of specifics into how this fund is distributed, right, in terms of, is finance not bound by those same restrictions?
No.
When they use it, right, so they can just use it for more if they,
If we had an instance, what I have said to the schools is that we should consider it as a $250,000 cap.
Right.
And not consider it to be a whole $1.5 million, because we do need it
There are
for
other-
unforeseen facilities,
Yep.
snow and
Snow and
ice,
ice.
all kinds of other things, emergencies that happen throughout the year.
Yeah.
And it's important to have that there.
but it is a little more flexible.
It's a lot more flexible. Previously, the special ed stabilization account, they could go, the school committee department could go every other year for $250, and then on the off year for $150.
Yeah.
So it really became something that they were using as part of their budget,
We should-
right? So it doesn't really make sense. So we had planned to use that to offset 3 years of market adjustments in the school teacher's contract. Unfortunately, we had to use the majority of it last year to offset the school deficit, and I anticipate we'll take this last 63 and then close this out.
Got it. Those are all my questions, thank you very much.
No problem.
All right, if there's no other questions for the town manager, I'll take a motion.
I'll move that the select board adopt the fiscal year 2026 budget policy statement.
I'll
Second it.
I have a motion and a second. The only other comment I would add is, let's just keep up these good work with this policy. This is what has allowed us to overcome many challenges in the last 24 months or so. I think keeping this policy in line and being mindful of the taxpayers, I think it's right there in black and white. That is what we are doing, that is our mission. So I think it's really, really important, and thank you. So,
Yeah, thank you.
so with that, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Yes, we are good. All right, moving on to consent items.
Mr. Chair, could we take the MassWorks grant off the consent calendar so we can have Andrew do his victory lap? Because I feel like it's
I
deserved.
think so, yeah, I think we
Yeah.
can move that up. We'll
As
have
long
a,
as we can see him do it.
Yeah, I've seen him do it, so.
I know typically we kind of blow through consent items pretty fast, but I do think item B warrants some further discussion. I won't make Andrew come up here and talk about, although you deserve a tremendous amount of credit, so yeah, why don't you come up?
And Jim, who's been working on the downtown
Jim,
forever,
yeah.
but
Just so you give us just a quick overview, and then we'll give you the praise.
My comments are 20 minutes for Lori. I'm kidding. I'll be quick. No, this was this was great. We had about $675,000 available to us for downtown streetscape improvements. Oh, she's got the clock for me. And unfortunately, we had some of that tied up in ARPA, which got pulled back, so we had to kind of figure out, okay, how are we going to fund this thing? So MassWorks is an opportunity that's an annual grant funding opportunity. We applied for it. We were fortunate to get it. We got $675,000 through ARPA, which gives us a total of $1 million to use for the project, which is great. So obviously, we're going to carry through the work that we completed in 2021, which was the conceptual designs that we did with Beta. And we will work with DPW on contracting with a qualified engineering firm to do the design and the improvements. And yeah, I see the project taking about a couple years to complete. We'll engage the public again. And we're also going to have to do the work of figuring out whether or not we want to underground the utilities. That's going to be a big question mark
I now have
going
a very
forward.
strong answer for that. I didn't use.
You do have a strong answer for that? Okay, we want to hear it. We want, obviously we need the select board's buy-in on whatever we're going to do in that regard, because it's going to be, money, time, and effort, and it's going to be a sacrifice to the downtown, 'cause it's going to be a lot of work. So we do have to figure that out. But very excited about the project, and looking forward to getting started on it.
And we wouldn't have been eligible for this if?
Oh, yeah, so that's another good point. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. So we recently passed the MBTA Communities compliant bylaw at town meeting last May, and that made us eligible for this grant, many other grants, but this was one of the first major grants we received where we would not have been eligible had we not been in compliance with MBTA Communities. So thank you to the town for doing that, and hopefully people see this is part of the reason why we wanted to be in compliance. To be eligible for these much-needed grant dollars. So,
And just for everybody at home, where will this get us? Will we get to like permit drawings or?
yeah, that's the intent, is to get us to, fully actionable construction drawings, permittable drawings, and then it's the next challenge of figuring out how to fund the actual capital project. So we'll probably have to phase that, I would imagine.
Yeah. And you think it'll take, obviously, the process will take 2 years to get to construction?
I would say probably a couple years, right? I mean, that was the timeline that seemed to have been presented to us when we had gone out to bid for this about a year ago, and that seemed to be the timeline.
Well, if it hasn't happened yet, I haven't actually looked, but can this sort of be updated on the website? Because there's been a lot of chit chat about the downtown lately, and it would be so nice to be able to direct people and say, this is where we're at. Like, this does not happen overnight. You guys are working tirelessly to find funding so that we can move forward. And this is a huge step, huge step.
Yeah, and I can totally appreciate the confusion. Some people think, oh, what did we do a couple of years ago? Didn't we do this already? And just to be clear, that was, conceptual drawings, it was community input, it was, outreach. And now we're taking that to the next level. We're really designing this, construction drawings, engineering, which is a little more complex, a little more time consuming, and a little more expensive. Yes. Yeah.
And you can see some updates on the town's master plan implementation website as well,
Great.
where you just made those updates
Sure.
with regard to this, to kind
That's
of
right.
keep things moving on.
We can pop this into the projects.
Yeah, I
tab
just
too.
like to be able to
Yeah,
direct people
absolutely.
to the website.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Terrific.
thank
Thank you very
you.
much. Appreciate
Terrific
it.
news, so.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
Thank you for your hard work.
So we went to send the thank you note to Andrew now?
Yes. I think you deserve some chocolate or something, I don't know.
Leftover candy.
Well, then we wouldn't have the grants unless you guys all of you worked on.
Focus on
and found them
finding that
and-
money.
Yeah, and wrote the grant letters and whatever applications that you guys all do.
It's a huge amount of effort
We
to
really do appreciate it.
try to get that money, and sometimes you win and sometimes you don't, and we're really lucky with it.
Yep.
This time we won.
All right,
Thank you.
so, thank you, Andrew. I will take a motion on our consent items.
I move that the select board accept all consent items.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
That's right. Okay, next up, approval of minutes. Has everyone had a chance to review the October 21st, 2024 minutes?
Was it something we said?
They're like, we've been here all day.
I only wish Bill Mitchell was here. See that everybody was for breakfast.
Is Andrew going to come back out for an encore now? All right, I had no other comments. Any comments on the minutes? If not, I'll take a motion.
I move to move the select board approve the minutes from the October 21st meeting as presented.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Any other comments or questions?
No, I let other people make the motion because I'm the clerk.
Got it.
I'm biased.
Sorry, we got
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Excellent. Okay, we are on to select board updates. Happy Halloween.
it. It was great.
It was a great night.
Oh,
yeah.
it was so much fun. And the kids I have to tell you, the kids were so polite. It was absolutely amazing, from the little ones to the big ones. They were so polite. The costumes are just killer though.
You could see them.
Big,
No big
huge
winter coats.
dinosaurs coming to, and there's just a little people inside, but it's fun.
And the weather helped.
Oh yeah, the weather did help. It's really fun.
And thank you to NAPD, they did a great job in our neighborhood particularly,
Well, it's a
just
go-to
patrol, you know,
neighborhood.
just to keep traffic down.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
the
they were
kids
good.
safe.
They were very good.
It's great.
I do have a few more wreaths, if anybody is interested, just, I'm in the phone book, give me a call, and, get your order in if you are interested. Not a lot, so just, if you think you're doing it, just get it in.
Okay.
In the phone book?
Hang on to the phone.
Okay.
Dave, I wasn't gonna say it.
I really do, I have an old one, it's valuable. But thanks for reporting.
When my kids were like in like 4th and 5th grade, or maybe a little longer, I asked them, you know, it occurred to me, and I was like, it's something I think that it was like on a TV show or something like that. And I asked them, I'm like, do you have any idea, like, what do you think a phone book is? And like one of them said, like, oh, it's got to be a phone shaped like a book. And the other one said, you put your phone in it, like it's a book where you open up and you put your phone in it to like, you know, to secure it. That's what they thought.
I'm gonna lend you an old Western Electric rotary phone, but the big heavy one.
Oh.
And then ask your kids how you
How to
make
dial it, yeah.
How
Dial.
to make it work.
They're like, where's speed dial?
All right.
I would,
Follow
unless it was a
through.
cover voting, I'm pretty sure, so I
Wait, yes.
We're gonna vote tomorrow.
Yeah.
Oh
That was
my
the night.
gosh, yeah, don't
You want to
forget
hang
to
out?
vote.
Don't forget
Election
to
watch
vote.
party?
Yeah.
Town manager's update.
The
Yeah.
parade, issues go.
You
You have the parade? You have the parade?
I can mention the parade,
Yeah.
sure. You mean the Veterans Parade?
Mm-hmm.
So election day tomorrow, 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. at the high school. Everybody vote to the high school. As of this morning, we had received 2,999. We were going to give an award to the 3,000th person, but they didn't come. Early voters here at Town Hall, which was awesome to see.
In person,
It was
that's
amazing.
awesome.
Yes. We processed 7,500 ballots during our advanced processing, which ended last Thursday. Thank you to I don't know if you came by here at all, but you couldn't even get in the parking lot because the number of workers that we had in the old senior center, which was amazing. We have 1,700 ballots that will be processed first thing in the morning that have come in since we finished. We are expecting about 850 voters an hour, so we are asking people to please be patient, and you will get through. The police and fire department will be on hand to help and make sure everything stays orderly, and the town clerk's office has done an absolutely amazing job, so
Absolutely.
we're so thankful
Thank
to
you,
them.
Yes, thank you.
We do have a group of meetings in here. On November 11th, 10 a.m., we have the Veterans Day Parade and Ceremony. Kicks off from right over near CVS. Our curbside leaf collection has started, and it is 4th, the 11th, the 18th, and the 22nd weeks. So make sure that you get your leaves out and your compostable bags. November 6th, we're doing COVID shots at the senior center. Next meeting, I will be here with the finance director to talk a little bit more about the school deficit. As you know, we did transmit a letter from myself as well as from the superintendent indicating that at the current time, that before any offsets or transfers, the deficit appears to be between $2.5 and $3.5 million. And I know that's a large gap, but we're trying to plan for the worst case scenario and hopefully come to a better scenario. I do want to thank our fire department for their continued diligence with our brush fires here in town, as well as the assistance they've been giving to Middleton. We were in Middleton again today, and I do know that the smoke is permeating into North Andover. We are asking people not to light any fires at home, so no burning. All burning permits are now not issued. Not to have fire pits, not to cook over open flame. Charcoal barbecue is not allowed. A gas barbecue is allowed, but that really asking people to be diligent. What's happening in our neighbors and to us is that it's so dry, and then when leaves fall, we'll get everything wet, and then the leaves fall, and we have to get it wet again. And so we're just asking people to please respect that.
And fireplace in your home is okay?
Fireplace in your home is okay. Yep. We do want to congratulate Human Resources because they won the pumpkin contest with their Swiftkin They got 42 votes, which was double anybody else.
Which
we-
one
Was
was
there?
That was the
Disco
Taylor
ball.
Swift Disco Ball. They were very excited when we gave them their award. And then I also wanted to congratulate some members of the police department who were recognized at the Massachusetts State Police Association convention, and that was Sergeant James, Officer Messina, Officer Houston, Officer McGettrick, KP Officer Seaweed, and Detective Furman. And that was due to their bravery for their response to a violent incident in April 2024. We're very thankful to them. And anyone does want to see the letters about the deficit, they are also attached in my report as well. One is the one that I sent to you in the Finance Committee, and the below one is the monthly report from the superintendent, who is doing a great job working through all of these issues.
It's a lot.
Awesome.
Thank
There's
you.
a lot going on right now, yeah, busy.
Okay. Our next meeting date, so we've got two on the calendar. Thursday, the 14th, will be an executive session with the school committee. And we're going to do that at the middle school,
At the
is
middle
the
school.
plan?
Yep.
Time? Do we have time
I
set?
believe it's at
5?
5. We're gonna do a walkthrough at 5.
Yeah, do a
and
walkthrough
then-
of the new middle
yeah.
school. Okay.
Are we in the library?
Do we know where in the building?
I don't believe we know where we're meeting yet, but we'll
Yeah.
keep you posted.
Somewhere in the building. Shouldn't be that big.
New Wing would make sense.
And then we'll have our next regular session. So that's just an executive session with the school committee, no open meeting for
Correct.
us that night. And then our next meeting will be the November 18th, where we'll get all kinds of updates. And with that, I'll take a motion.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you all.